Hi everyone, my name is Jotna Toribio, and today we are with Fedor Kozlov. We're in the loop right now in front of the Daily Center, and I thought it would be a really great opportunity to have a conversation about reproductive rights, which is a topic that I know a lot of people want to have more information about. And I want to kickstart this conversation by understanding what that involves. And in your opinion, what has been some of the challenges that you have faced when battling these cases on behalf of your clients?
Sure, it's a big topic for sure.
Yep.
Uh, it and again, I know this topic mostly from the litigation part
Mhm,
in the Court of Appeals that is also down the block.
mhm.
The most challenging part is to figure out the ownership of the embryos that are left in case of divorce, in case of death, in case of disagreements. And then the other thing is, of course, what rights people have towards the child who was born as a result of IVF procedures. So the ownership part, if you think about it, when a couple gets married and they realize that the only way for them to go, or that can be also a personal choice, by the way, not the only way, but they decide that for whatever reason they need to employ services of a clinic to have frozen eggs and to have a baby this way. So, of course, at the time of the marriage, everybody is in love and they want to create a family. And it's not an easy process. It takes a lot of money, a lot of time. But I've seen couples who successfully went through the process and they have a baby or sometimes several babies. But then you still have embryos that are still frozen in that clinic. So the question becomes what to do with the embryos. So one of the things you can do, you can always destroy them. The embryo is not considered to be live beings. It's a property, but for which you have to pay rent to the clinic, and for which both parties have rights, because that's their something that they created during marriage. Uh, and the question becomes if they get divorced, who owns it? So that's most of the litigation that exists. The last case on the matter was the matter of Katsup. And this is a story of couple that came here from Israel and they had a baby through the IVF process. And then they got divorced and they had embryos that were still frozen somewhere in state of Maine. And the question became because the father didn't he wanted to destroy the embryos, uh, and he didn't want his DNA to be anywhere else. He didn't want to pay child support in case another baby is born. But the mom wanted to keep the embryos because of her age, because she wouldn't be able to carry another child. So she said, "I want them," and I agreed to pay for the storage, and I don't want to destroy them, and I do not want to donate them. So we were the lawyers initially at the trial court that was in DuPage County, and the judge ruled in favor of the father. He said that this is his DNA; he has the right to say no, and he doesn't want to pay child support. And it's difficult for him to know if there's a baby somewhere out there, born from his DNA, and he wouldn't be able even to know this child. Well, we took it to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals reversed it. And this is the last case on the matter in Illinois. The Court of Appeals said that we will look at the father and the mother, both of them, and we want to see, what is their interest in keeping those embryos. And because of mom wanted to have another child, and if she wouldn't have this embryo she would not be able to have another child. So the court said as long as she pays for the storage, as long as she maintains whatever she needs to do with the clinic, this will be her embryos, because the father just wanted to destroy them. But interesting twist there is that the father would not have to pay child support. That I know
Wow.
all the father is concerned about all
Wow.
the time. But if this is not your will, like if this is not, you don't want this baby pretty much, and these babies will be born through the embryo process, IVF, then you don't have to pay child support unless you voluntarily wanted to. So that's a case called Katsup versus Katsup that talks about the ownerships of the embryos, talks about reproductive rights, because this is mother's right, so to have a baby, versus father's right not to have a baby, I guess. Child support, embryos, ownership, all of these things discussed in that case. So that's one of the most challenging things. And what's interesting also about this case is that the case was heard was the Court of Appeals, Illinois Court of Appeals. The father wanted this case to be heard with Illinois Supreme Court, but the Illinois Supreme Court decided not to.
Interesting. Why
Yeah,
was
well,
that?
Illinois Supreme Court, the Supreme Courts, just like the United States Supreme Court, they have a right to choose to select their cases that mostly important. And every time we have, you know, election for the president election, they always talk about this reproductive rights. It's one of the points of the debate, the abortions and all of those things. And it's a very hot topic, hot issue. And sometimes the courts just don't want to talk about it, or because the matter is not ready or ripe, so they don't want to make a decision, because the Court of Appeals is a court of law, so they make decisions about the law just as trial courts. But the Illinois Supreme Courts and the United States Supreme Courts, they're also courts of law, of course, but they also think about public policy. They also think about society. So sometimes they make decisions with these aspects in their mind and not just strictly the laws. I don't know what was the decision behind Illinois Supreme Court not to take that case, but so far this is the case in Illinois. Now the legal meaning for this, there is not a single case in the United States that was decided by the Supreme Court of that state in regards to embryos, reproductive rights, and IVF. For some reason, they all refuse to do that. One of the things is that once the Supreme Court of the state decides the case, it can be appealed further to United States Supreme Court. So that can be one of the reasons why judges don't want to go there yet. But ultimately, something's going to happen, because when we were with the Court of Appeals, and it also happened during the COVID era, so we had to do everything by Zoom, which was fun. You can cite other cases from different states, but they're not binding on this court. So the binding case becomes when you have a court from your jurisdiction, or when the United States Supreme Court decides something. So right now, the only binding case in Illinois is that case of Katsup, but it's not binding on other cases out of state.
Wow.
Yeah.
So much to learn.
I know.
So with reproductive rights, if there is somebody that is watching this video who is at the initial starting point of their search of trying to find the right attorney that can help them with this, what would you say is like your number one advice on how to get that process started, or how to contact you and your team to help them with this?
Well, I'll take a step back before I answer your question. From my experience, what I notice most of the time, the reproductive right, you have to have an agreement about with your partner, with your spouse, whoever that can be, put it on paper. It's very uncomfortable, and I get it. It was very uncomfortable many years ago. Now people more, cautious about prenuptial agreements, postnuptial agreements, but the embryos and everything that connects to it is a part of the agreement. It's like a contract that you gotta put on the paper. And the reason is very simple. The life changes all the time.
Sure.
And that's why at the end of, let's say, divorce process with kids, we always have marital settlement agreement, allocation judgment. We want to put it on the paper, because as lawyers in litigation, we don't trust people to maintain the same status quo over the years. So we want a piece of paper, at least that can guide us through 5 years from now. Same with embryos. The same with like a prenuptial agreement. So you just have to put it on the paper, the agreement between the parties. In case we have a child that is born via, this procedure, we will, this is going to be the child support, this is going to be this. I know you cannot predict the future, but at least it will be some kind of starting point where you will, where you can begin. Again, at the very, you don't want to think about that something's going to bad happen in your life when you fall in love and you have a family and you want to have a baby. So you don't want to, you know, put it on the paper right away, but you have to, just for the best interest of that child that will be born. So later there will be no more disputes and it'll be an easier process. So that's one of the things that you need to talk to your partner or your spouse about: who will have the ownership of the embryos in case of death, in case of divorce, how the estate planning is going to go. It pretty much is wills and trust. Who's going to have that baby, who will, in case of accident, who's going to be the parent of this child if both parents die, things like that. Because the embryo and the child that is born from the embryo is the same, it's just the same child as everybody else. It doesn't matter. So that child has all of the rights as other children do. So that's what you need to do. The rest of it is logistics. When you need to select the center where you will do the whole process of IVF. They usually have their own lawyers that will give you their standard agreement. You can take that agreement, bring it to your lawyer just to make sure that everything's right and correct. You need to. This is very important decision that is also kind of expensive, the IVF. And people mostly think about it as a medical procedure only, so they just need to talk to the doctors, to the medical center. But you got to keep in mind that there's a lot of legal things involved there,
Yeah.
including contracts with the clinics, including contracts between two spouses, two partners, and everything else that surrounds it. So your question was that when people need to contact us in order to start the process, I think you need, once you think about it, once you start thinking about it, go and talk to your lawyer just for a consultation, what it involves, how the process is going to go, what it takes. This way you have some kind of background, so later when you go to a clinic and you already have information and additional questions to them. So it's all about information, it's all about education. Get as much information as you need, and once you started the process, that's when you definitely need to put something right and you need to speak to a lawyer.
Wow, that's great
Uh,
advice. What happens if an IVF clinic makes a mistake?
well, what happens? The lawsuit happens. Usually filed by people who suffered damages, and in this case, it would be um, either the embryo was destroyed or something else happens. That's that's why, again, one of the reasons even though the clinics have their own lawyers, you got to take their agreement to your lawyer to read it, because that agreement will have lots and lots of waivers of liability. So it's like you sign a waiver when you, I don't know, go into ice skate rink, and if you fall, that's your own problem. This case, in this situation, it's a little bit different because the IVF or something that is not natural, uh, the whole thing can have complications, and there can be a variety of complications. Some of them would be, not a fault of a clinic, just because something happens or something didn't match. Like I had a few cases when it takes 2 or 3 times for embryo to actually become a child and go through the process. So there can be some failed results along the way, just like in a normal life. You don't. It's not like the baby. It's not that easy to have a child conceived and born. So that's exactly the same thing. But then when negligence happens, on the part of the clinic or the people that work there, and there can be very many different examples. You file a lawsuit; those lawsuits usually lengthy. They're not uh, that easy, I would say. It's just like malpractice lawsuits. If you think about it, if you go to a doctor for a surgery and something bad happens after that, you need to prove that the doctor did something wrong. Same is here. So you would need to prove that something went wrong, and that was something preventable, and that caused the potential injury or destruction. The worst cases, of course, that I've seen is when you go through the process, the baby is born, and the baby has some kind of defect.
Mm.
So that's something that you already have a child, you already have a human being, and now, of course, the parents want to blame someone, which is very understandable and natural. But then, not every time it's a mistake that is done by a clinic. But you still have to go again and talk to the lawyer. And these kind of cases are costly. They take time. You have to have experts. We don't want to think about it, of course, when we want to uh, think that everything will be fine. But again, it goes on not only into negligence type of litigation, it can be also a breach of contract as the supporting cause of action. Because remember, you do have some kind of contract with the IVF clinic. Not everything is waivable. So you can't just like ask people to waive everything and not to have a lawsuit later, but still you need to read this document just so you can have a certain cause of action or ask questions later to people if anything happens.
Wow. So if you are thinking about IVF, the best thing that you can do to protect your reproductive rights is to hire an attorney on the front end and being proactive about understanding your rights and how you can protect yourself. Is that
Yes.
accurate?
So you do like the main thing is to get yourself educated, to get as much information as you possibly can. The hope is that you will not need an attorney in terms of like later. But you have a baby, you're you're not nobody's gonna file for divorce. You stay together, and everything's fine. You also hope that the baby will be healthy, and there'll be no reasons to talk to a lawyer. But you need to, the very first step that you need to do, talk to a lawyer before you go to clinic. Make sure that your lawyer, family lawyer, reviews the contract with the clinic before. And then if you have an issue, pick up the phone and ask questions, because that's also one of the things that I see happen over and over. People tend to like not to answer question when it's really a good time, and then they would do that later on when it's kind of a little bit sometimes too late. So, but you just have to have somebody with the knowledge that you can always consult. While you're going through all the medical procedures, like we spoken before, will take your stress away from you as lawyers so you can focus on something that is important for you.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's incredible insight, incredible advice. And I hope that everybody that's watching found this conversation helpful.
So, thank you.
Thank you.